So Adam, it's great to see you. Really great. And even if we are not in the same country. So my name is Marc Silvestre, and just want to share a few things first. So we know each other for a long time. I started to dance with you maybe 2007, 2008, 9, 10, before I did this five rhythm training
Mm.
with Gabrielle. And you were always so inspiring for me as a teacher, as a man. It's a long journey, as old friendships. And last year, during this terrible illness, cancer you have to go through,
Mm.
we spoke many times. And at one point, I had this idea, oh, Adam, you should write a letter for the young teachers.
Yeah.
And because because you spend a lot of time with Gabrielle,
Mm.
because you have taught in so many countries with so many different people,
Mm.
and you have changed a lot. It's what you told me
Mm.
in your way to be in this kind of movement practice. So this idea came. Why not to do a video? Why not to share like in a way, like easy way?
Mm.
And so thank you so much to accept. Thank you so much to take time for that.
Mm.
And if you don't understand my French accent, don't worry. The most important is to understand Adam. And usually Adam can pretend to understand me, so it can work. It
Mm.
can work well.
Mm.
Okay. So um, Adam, let's start.
Mm.
Uh, let's start. Why so simply from the beginning?
Mm.
How did you discover this practice? Why have you done this amazing step,
Mm.
incredible step, what I know, to cut with your like normal life somewhere, to take so much risk to
Mm.
follow this practice? Are you okay with this?
Yeah, I love telling this story actually because it has a kind of cascade of pieces to it. How I came upon Gabrielle's work was bit by bit in a way, you could say, or you could say I got it in the flash, like literally a moment. It was like, ding, got it. But it took me a while to catch up with what it was that I'd got. I was in an encounter group in 1988, which that was a thing in the 80s. Throw a bunch of people in a room together for a weekend and see what happened with not very much structure at all. And one night, one of those groups, late on the Saturday night, like 1 in the morning, and we'd been group process since 10 in the morning, on the Saturday. So 1 in the morning, Sunday morning, someone said, "Oh, let's make masks." So they got out paper and crayons, and we all made masks in about 10 minutes. Cut it out, put it on, elastic bands around the ears to hold it in place. And then they put on this music for us to move with the masks on. And
Yeah.
the very first note of the music, I can still remember that moment. And I went into a trance. I didn't know that's what was happening at the time.
Yeah.
At the time, I was like, it just felt like something a bit like taking magic mushrooms, which I had done. It was my most sort of familiar kind of touchstone for that kind of experience. I went into an altered state of consciousness and moved with this mask on, with this amazing music and with people. And I had an incredible journey for about 40 minutes and then it stopped. And there were only three of us left. Everyone else had kind of timed out, but three of us had this really incredible time. I had an incredible time, and I took the mask off, and I was like, "What was that music?" And the group leaders said, "Oh, it was some American dancer called Gabrielle Roth. Don't know anything about her, but you're welcome to copy the tape if you like." This was the days of cassette tapes. So I did. I copied I was kind of friends with the group leader. So I went round another day with a cassette tape and copied the tape. And I had that copy of Gabrielle Roth, her her piece of music called Initiation, which for those of you who don't know is like it's a wave, it's a five rhythms wave, and it's a body parts thing. But I didn't know any of that. I just went through an extraordinary experience, and I used to put on that tape and close the curtains and dance in my living room and try to recover that sense of wow for 3 years.
You
And
were in London at that time, right?
no, I was living in Cardiff, actually, which is the capital of Wales, the Pays de Galles. And I never quite got back the intensity of that first experience, but I still enjoyed it. I did it like 10 times over 3 years or something. And then a friend of mine was visiting in 1991, and he had a copy of a book called Maps to Ecstasy. And I was a bit pissed off with him at one point. He was visiting for a whole weekend, and we were good friends. And the way that good friends are, sometimes we got irritated with each other. I was irritated with him, and I picked up this book, and it fell open on a page about anger and suggesting that you could move your body as a way of processing or like being with your anger. And so I put the book down and stomped up and down the living room a few times and felt much better. And then I was clocked. Oh, this is the book by the same person. This is a book by Gabrielle Roth. And later that night, we were sitting having a whiskey, and I was due to go back to work after 2 weeks on holiday. And I was saying to this friend of mine, "Oh God, I don't want to go back to work." And he said, "Well, don't then." And I was like, "Oh, but the mortgage." He said, "Well, sell the house." He's an Aries, you know. So I was like, God, I actually couldn't I? I could sell the house, quit my job, and go in search of my soul. I could do that. I'm actually free. And there and then I decided to do that. And it wasn't until months later that, what happened then was I did put my house on the market, and I did quit my job, and I bought a van, lived in a van for a while, and I opened this. Here's another stage. I bought my own copy of Maps to Ecstasy. That's Gabrielle Roth's first book. For those of you who don't know, you should read it. If you haven't, if you're interested and you don't know, you should read it. And I bought a copy of all her cassette tapes. There were six or something out at that time, and I started dancing at home every day as an adjunct to my meditation practice. Because for 10 years I'd been sitting in meditation for an hour every day. And I was like, oh, this is a fun way to meditate. I was really getting into it. And then I opened this magazine, and I decided to use the money from the house to do any workshop I wanted to do. I had no idea what kind of thing I might do, but I just thought, oh, I'll go and do some workshops and personal development, something.
Just how old were
I
you?
was 28.
28. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Just to yeah.
Yeah, yeah, thank you. And so I'm opening this magazine of sort of what's on in my area, and I see this little advert at the bottom. It was literally about that big at the bottom of one of the pages at the back. It said, "Life Dance, 5 Rhythms with Susanna and Yakov Darling Khan." And I was like, "Oh, I'm going to do that. I'm going to go and do that workshop." So I did that workshop, and of course, dancing for a weekend with a group is a way higher voltage experience than just dancing at your home with every day with a cassette tape. And that weekend, I was like, wow. I remember this experience where I was in those days, whenever we got to chaos, the way Susanna and Yakov would lead it would Yakov would put on this djembe with big straps around his chest, and he would have this djembe between his legs, standing up, and he's like, and he would drum. That was how they did chaos every time. None of this electronic trance music that became very fashionable in the 90s. He would drum this djembe, and we would go up and down the room and fall into chaos. And I remember there was one moment where I was about to go across the room, and I was terrified. And I knew that I was going to fall, basically, not physically, kind of psychically. I don't even want to say psychologically because I think it was deeper than just the psyche. You know, it's like spiritual experience. I knew I was going to fall into something, and I was terrified. And I realized that I had this idea encoded in my cells of my body that letting go would involve being destroyed, and I'd never really let go in my life ever. And I in that same moment as realizing I had that belief, I had the experience that God was holding me in her hands and that I was going to be fine. And all I have to do is let go. And I wouldn't be destroyed, I'd be held. And I
Mm.
danced across that room one more time, and that's exactly what happened. I let go and I fell into the arms of God. An incredible experience, you know. And so by the end of that weekend, at the end of the weekend, they said, "Oh, we've got this New Year workshop. It's a 7 day residential workshop, and we've got 3 spaces left." And I was like, "I want to be there." And this was like, I don't know, 4 months after that. It The first time when I picked up her book, you know, and
Yes.
made that decision to leave everything, not realizing it was anything to do with the book. I didn't realize that until later. That was 3 months later. I was on that workshop with Susanna Nyakov, and then 1 month later was New Year. So I went out of that weekend workshop, went to a phone box, no mobiles, went to a phone box, called the organizer, got one of those last 3 places. There I am on that week residential over New Year. That was a very, very strong workshop. Now, out of that workshop came a whole bunch of us who went on to do Gabrielle's training in the end in
A-
1994.
And it's a detail, but just to know,
Mhm.
like how many people in this kind of workshop in this time?
24?
24. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was full at 24.
Mm.
And most of that 24 people went on to do a year-long ongoing group with Susanna and Yakov. And
Mm.
about
I
half of
think it's
them,
important, Adam, to say
yeah,
it, yeah?
yeah,
Because if we remember this video, it's letter for a young teacher
yeah,
to imagine how it started, even with Yakov and Susanna,
yeah.
and all those people like you who discovers this practice. First, it was an amazing commitment
Mm,
for a long time,
mm,
small group,
yeah,
deep workshop, long workshop.
yeah.
And what I understand, what I hear, it's also a lot of intuition. It's not something you understood. You
I
followed
didn't understand.
something.
No, I didn't know what I
Yeah.
was saying yes to.
It's just like the
But
respect.
something did, you know.
Yes.
And when I was on that week-long residential over New Year, during that workshop, I knew I woke up in the middle of the night and I was like, I have a deep relationship with Gabrielle Roth. I can
Yeah.
feel it. I haven't met her, but I can feel it, and I know this is going to be my life's work. I just knew it.
And you spoke about this group of this New Year workshop,
Mm,
who did the training after, who worked with Gabrielle.
mm.
Could you say many of them had the same call, or it was
There was a
in your memory?
feeling. I think so. Perhaps I had it particularly strongly. I was
Mm.
really on fire. I mean, there are some other personal details, like a father figure of mine had killed himself, so I'd lost my job and my father figure and my house, all like literally in 3 days. All those things happened, and I was on fire. I was in my Saturn return. I had a Pluto transit across my sun and Jupiter across my sun. It was a really big time for me, and I'd never done anything so impulsive. It was like a real break from what I was used to.
Mm.
And so I was particularly on fire, but I think it was a very wonderful and inspiring time in the Five Rhythms world back then. And because it was just beginning. Nobody knew Gabrielle Roth. It was so exciting. Her
Mm.
music was in a few sort of hippie new age shops, but hardly anyone knew about her. She had
Yeah.
one book out. She came to the UK every now and then, and that after that New Year workshop, she came to London and did a couple of weekends in February, and I signed up for both of them. And I was there at the opening Friday night, which was big, it was like 120 people, which to me was like massive. I couldn't believe there were
Yeah.
120 people dancing in the same room. And because even 24 seemed like a big workshop in Susanna and Yakov's group. But that time with Gabrielle, it seemed like a huge crowd. And Gabrielle was such a flirt. She was wonderful and funny and sexy and so she just exuded magic, really, and we all felt it. And not only did she exude magic, but she was, the early days of something like the Five Rhythms taking off is a very exciting thing to be part of because there's a magic in the air with in the pioneer days of something like that when it's still small enough, like in the training I did, Gabrielle, we all knew each other. I didn't have to do an application form or anything. We just all knew each other.
When did you do this training?
94.
94.
Yeah.
Okay. And how
And she'd
many?
done one training before that in 1989, which is the one Susanna and Yakov were on. And Kathy and Laurie were there, and Andrea was on that one, and Dilys Morgan Scott was on that one, and Vin Marty Arjuna was on that one.
Yes, yeah, yeah, yeah.
And,
And that's really interesting to know that. And could you say a few words about this training and how Gabrielle was with you and what
mm,
she gave you as I mean, for real and like an inspiration?
mm,
What did you receive from her?
mm,
I mean, from the beginning, yeah? And let's see after,
mm.
because everything
But you
evolves.
see, I felt it before I'd met her on that workshop over New Year. And I woke up in the middle of the night and I felt it. I could just feel, wow, I have a really deep connection with this human being
Yeah,
in a way that I've never experienced before. And and I was a devotee of this Indian guru for 10 years when I was doing his meditation. But this was something else. There was an aliveness to Gabrielle and a sparkle and a humanity at the same time as there being this sort of not otherworldly as in ethereal, but there was magic around. It was spirited, really spirited atmosphere that she created. That first Friday night when she was there, she would never turn up on time to workshops. She always had someone else do the warm up, and she would just kind of float in half an hour late.
yeah.
And I remember sort of thinking, like, where is she? And we were all
Mm,
dutifully dancing, and then this woman, this very svelte, slight woman with black hair and wearing a black leather jacket came kind of swirling past me, and I'm like, oh, there she is. And you could
yeah,
feel it, it's like my body could feel it before I saw her. I turned around and there's this
yeah.
woman with the black leather jacket, and you
I
know what I'm
remember
talking
that.
about.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah. And she was
So,
fun, she like she inspired all of us to just go, wow, life is amazing. It had that kind of atmosphere to it, and anything's possible. I can be any way that I am, and she just encouraged us to all be everything that we are, and thereby be nothing.
mm,
To be everything and nothing, and just don't get caught in between. This was one of her big teachings. Don't get attached to being someone.
yeah.
Get attached to being everyone, or just be everyone and be no one. Just don't hang out too long in the middle gray zone where you think you're somebody.
So,
Is
did you
you're
start
somebody.
to travel to dance at
Yeah.
that time?
I did that ongoing group. This is Anna and Yakov, and by November of that year-long process, my partner Dawn and I were flying to America to do a workshop called Mirrors.
Hmm.
And um, so that was late 92. And this money that I got from selling the house, because I'd renovated this house. So I had quite a lot of money from it, a lot from those days. And it kept me going for 3 years. And I basically just danced and danced and danced. I did tons of work with Susanna and Yakov, who were brilliant. And I did a lot of work with Gabrielle. I flew over to the States several times and did long things with her in California and New York. and did everything that she did in Europe.
When you
And
say long things, how many days? How many?
7 days, 10 days. Once I did a 2 week thing. And that was
Wow,
epic.
wow.
Yeah. Two
Yeah.
weeks. That really blew my socks off. That was later when I was about 40 years old and was already an established teacher.
Does she work with musicians or
Yes, she always had
live
live drummers.
live
Yeah.
drummers? Yes.
Yeah. And she was always quite, and she always worked a lot with silence too. It was hard work. Working with Gabrielle was hard. Dancing with her was not, it wasn't just fun. There wasn't this sort of oiling the wheels with great music that we movement teachers often aspire to now. Like, let's try to create a movement space that's full of good music so everyone's just, it's easy to let go and be inspired. No, no. Working with Gabrielle was dry, often, long periods with no music. It was hard work, it was very zen. And yet shit would start happening that was just wild. You'd be working this very dry way where it was sort of, God, can I take another step? And then suddenly you'd be down the rabbit hole and something would be happening that was life changing. And then without warning, the drums would start. And she'd have one, two, three live musicians play, and we'd go into this wild let go space where we weren't even thinking about the rhythms anymore. We were just dancing. She was brilliant and
Mm.
and inspirational. Uh,
I ask you that you said it, and it's to also understand the difference with like 2026
mm,
and when you started with Gabrielle, and even me when I danced with her.
mm,
You said dry. It's complicated to translate in French, but I
mm,
understand what you mean. And so it's interesting, really interesting from
mm,
my point of view.
mm,
And Adam, uh, so I understand how passionate it was to dance,
mm.
but why did you decide to become teacher?
It wasn't even a decision. I just knew it. I knew that's
Uh,
what was going to happen. It wasn't like,
not
I
just
think
to
I'm going to be a
dance.
five rhythm teacher. I just knew this is what I'm going to do with my life. And it was like, and then it was then that I looked back on that time 4 months previously, and I was like, oh, that was the night I decided to leave my house, quit my job, go and search for my
Yes.
soul. That was
Mhm.
2 hours after picking up her book and seeing her photo on the back cover and stomping up and down the living room. And I think if Gabrielle taught me anything, it's that that's how real life happens. Real life happens, the big movements happen kind of from underground before we know what we're doing. And we catch up and like, oh, that's what's happening. It's more like that. It's not a decision from the head. It's something happens in the body, from the feet, even. And by the time you've noticed that it's happening, it's already happening. And then you can get on board with understanding what's going on. But the real stuff, the good stuff, happens from the feet up, or the
That's
belly up at least. Yeah,
mm.
I know you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, but it's so great to hear it
Mm,
from you, Adam.
mm.
And
So,
okay,
so
let's
I
go.
didn't, I didn't decide to be a teacher. I just
Yeah.
knew that I am, like that.
Yeah.
That's my nature, and I just said yes to it. It was more like that.
Mm. And during all those years, did you go to dance in different places also as a dancer, not like as a teacher? Did you dance a lot?
Yeah,
Did you start that?
Ga Gabrielle
How did
was
you organize?
very, Gabrielle was very firm on that we should always remain a student.
Yeah,
And I did. I made it my business to keep dancing in other people's spaces um, for a long time, and then gradually, I'm still a little conflicted about this,
interesting.
yeah, like ashamed of it. But the truth is, I gradually stopped dancing in other people's workshops, and there were several reasons for that. which we can go into later. But one of the reasons was I just got a lot more choosy, and like there were a lot of a lot of spaces that teachers were holding, I found really difficult to be in because it's like, no, don't do it like that. I began to get ideas, or I mean, I could call them ideas, but it was more than that. It was more like a body sense of what's right and what's not, or what's kind of in alignment with what's happening in the room and what's not. And um, I see a lot of really poor quality teaching happening. I'm a critical guy. I see I easily see things like and go, that's not really quite right. And so I had that experience a lot of like, oh shit, this isn't working for me. But in my perception, it's not really working for the group either. And like, goodness me, it's a hard thing to be a human being. And it's a
It's,
really hard thing to lead human beings to be themselves through movement together in a group in a world that's falling apart and in distress, which has only got more so as the years have gone on. That since I've been teaching, it's got more explicitly so. And I think it's a very, very difficult job to teach movement to a group. It looks easy, especially if you're doing it well. It looks easy. And on a good day, it is easeful. But actually, I think it's a really difficult job. And over the years, I began to get more and more uncomfortable with the way that other people were doing it, and less willing to sit in other people, to dance in other people's spaces. And my own practice on my own became, at home. I continued doing that. I'm a real believer in home practice on your own, often without music. A little bit.
hmm.
It doesn't need to be attempting to replicate what you experience in a workshop or even an evening class. It doesn't need to be 2 hours, doesn't need to be 1 hour, but it does need to be like 15 minutes, 20 minutes, at least 5 minutes, something every day. And I notice the days I don't manage that, and those days just feel a bit crap. And I think it's really important for us teachers to be humble enough to go right back to the beginning every day, or have that aspiration to like, let me do my best to show up every day, at least a little bit, and do the practice that I'm encouraging other people to do in a humble way, as though I don't know what I'm doing, because, and to try to remember that place where I don't know what I'm doing, which with Gabrielle was so brilliant for, because her rooms were so full of that atmosphere of wonder and mystery, which I think has to be at the core of any spiritual practice. And one of the problems in my perception or my opinion with the five rhythms practice is that it's got such a clear, simple structure that it's easy for us to think we know what we're doing. And
Hmm.
that's a problem.
It's my question. Next question. You said it can be a really difficult job.
Mm.
What is difficult? If you want, I really speak to Adam Barley now. What he can say to the Adam Barley I told you before, huh?
Mm.
30 years ago, 25 years ago, 20 years ago. What is difficult in this job?
Mm.
Um, all of us, all teachers, we met some difficulties, or maybe we don't see difficulties, maybe we escape from these difficulties. But how could you name it? Name them.
Okay.
What come to your mind now? I guess it's a lot, huh? But
Yeah,
what
there's
come to your
probably a
mind?
few different ways I could answer that question, but what comes to mind is that when and I think it's generally true, when we stand up in front of a room and attempt to lead a group of human beings through what is really a profound process, a real, organic, alive process of change. When we say, okay, I'm going to do that, and I now do that, I take hold of the space, I take hold of the group, and I steer us through an experience. There's always going to be a mix of soul and ego in what I do. Hopefully, I'm going to have enough integrity that my body, heart, and mind are in some semblance of unity, and that my presence and my actions have a degree of soulfulness about them because of that. That there's and then there's space for spirit to move through that soulfulness, and we're all being moved by the mystery of things as it comes through the body, that mix of body and spirit that Gabrielle was all about. You know, she would say over and over again, that's what the core of our work is to heal the split between body and spirit. So hopefully, as a leader, I'm doing that to some extent. I'm soulfully unified, and I'm coming to your question. The answer to your question is I'm soulfully unified. Spirit is coming through me. I'm in service to the room and to life, and something is happening that is in alignment with something bigger than me. And I'm full of shit. I'm just a guy. I've got my trips. I've got my addictions. I've got my unconscious needs and desires that I'm acting out my little human dramas, the unresolved childhood patterns that I'm inevitably subject to within myself are acting out. And that never stops. I mean, there are moments perhaps in the cycle of my own becoming and my own growing where I might be truly brilliant and inspired, but the cycle never seems to stop. There's always more. It's a wild garden in here, and it has a way of now more, Adam. Here's more of your unconscious material to see and digest and heal and move through. And when I'm that has a way of, in that environment of being reflected back to me. Whatever my stuff is that I'm acting out has a way of being reflected back in the group process, and probably particularly through certain individuals in the group. And there will be certain individuals in the group who I just can't stand, or who just like, damn, I wish that person wasn't in the group.
Give example, Adam. Give example. Give example where you were really triggered.
Yeah.
Don't name anybody, yeah,
No,
but
no.
just let's just be practical. An example will come to your mind where it was like you were really shitty, and a
Yeah.
place where you transform in a good way. Because I'm guessing,
Yeah.
give two examples because as teacher we met that
Yeah.
all the time.
Yeah. And when we meet that, when I was a younger man, it would all like the urge in me to go, they are wrong and I'm going to fix them. Like the primary way it would show up for me was people not moving enough. They should be moving more than that. It's like, how many times have I said move your feet and you're still not moving your feet? How many times have I said relax your jaw and let your breath out? And they're still like that at the back of the room. I'm like, you're not listening to what I say. You're not doing what I say. God forgive me. Those human beings, please forgive me. My stuff, my projection. On a good day, I would breathe deep enough and maybe drop back onto the dance floor myself, put on some music and get on the dance floor like everybody else and let go of my fucking trips and get over
Mm.
my stuff so that I can then hold the group again without being like hiddenly fixated on this one person who I think should be moving more than they are. And and kind of focus on what's working in the room instead of my idea of what isn't working, and encourage the life in the room and let the group process and just take care of things. Later on, as I got more skilled, I began to make individual interventions with people. And I might
Mm.
speak to them in a break, or I might even go up to them and do some kind of personal one-to-one intervention with them. And sometimes, I mean, I was a firecracker. I mean, I still am a bit of a firecracker, but I really was when I was younger, and I was so fucking sure of myself that I was arrogant, in my certainty that I knew what this person needed. And sometimes I would go up, and these days, you're supposed to ask for permission to touch somebody. I didn't know any of that, that it was a good idea to actually ask, may I touch you? I would just go up to people and shove them. If someone was not moving their feet, I would go up, not always with my hand, I would go stand next to them and just shove them with their elbow until they overbalanced. With my shoulder, I mean. I would physically move them until they overbalanced. But then I would stay with them because I knew they'd have a strong reaction. I would stay with them and dance with them and like, I'm really here with you. I'm not against you. I'm just see that you're stuck and I'm actually trying to help you. And I might be wrong in the way I'm doing it, but I'm really trying to help you. And sometimes I know that that was really helpful for people. I've had people come up to me and say, that time when you shoved me, I hated it, but it was a breakthrough.
And
Or
sometime.
and sometimes I never saw those people again. And I'm sorry, you know.
Mm.
I was an arrogant young man. Now I'm a sometimes arrogant old man. And we do our best. But I
We
think
do our
that
best.
kind of thing, we meet the parts of ourselves that we don't like.
Right. Repeat that. Yes, we meet. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And that's hard because our job is to get out of the way and let God happen in the room. And when we're triggered, that's that's hard to get out of the way. So that's the first thing that comes to mind of what's difficult, and then especially with longer workshops, people. I mean, I tried so many things. I remember one woman. There was one woman who I was having such a difficult time with her, and was on a workshop in England, and in my honest attempt to, I could tell like, we both hated each other. It wasn't just me triggering her. She was triggered. I mean, it wasn't just me triggered by her. She was triggered by me too. I could feel it. And so I went to talk to her in lunchtime and I confessed to her that that my kind of relationship with mother was being triggered by her. And I'm sorry. I know it's like that's what's going on for me. It's difficult for me, and I'm sorry. That was a very deep learning for me because what she did with that vulnerability of mine. That was an honest attempt to really meet her and say, look, I'm human. It's difficult between us. I'm sorry for my part. This is what my part is. What she did with that vulnerability was write a very public letter to the entire dance community, telling them what I'd said and telling them that I was unfit to lead groups. She wrote to Susanna and Yakov complaining, because at the time they were the biggest teachers in the UK. She wrote to Gabrielle complaining about this awful teacher called Adam Barley. You know what Gabrielle said to me? She said, if I didn't get a letter of complaint about you every now and then, I would think you're not doing your job. Thank you, Gabrielle. She was
Wow.
so good.
She was so good.
And I think
And
we have to accept that if we're not going to play it safe, I mean, you can play it safe as a teacher, you know, and be nice and play nice music and not challenge anybody and not do any processes that are particularly challenging. And it's okay. That's not worthless. You can create a space that's just very harmonious and easy for people to be in, but it doesn't stir them up very much. That's all right. If that's some people, that's their teaching style. It's really not my teaching style. I'm confrontational, and I like getting hold of anything that's stuck in the room and going and until it starts moving. And that's like everything. that's my style has pros and cons. It has there's ways in which, I mean, since I got ill, I've had so many letters from people saying that I changed their life. I just had another one a week ago. This woman who's just heard that I got ill, and she thanked me for a moment when I looked her in the eyes, and she just started crying because I looked at her so deeply. And I'm so touched that I've changed people's lives in a good way. Thank God. Wow. So it was all worth something. Um,
Mm.
and I know I really upset some people. You know, I got another letter fairly recently from someone who said, "You did this, this, and this." I can't even remember what it was now. What a pity. That would have made a good story. I can't remember what it was. Something that just really pissed her off and offended her. And she never came back. It was like 20 years ago. And she never went back to the practice again either. I'm sorry. My bad. But that happens, shit happens, and I think if you want to do really deep catalytic work that has the potential to be life-changing for people, you have to kind of accept that you're going to really fuck up sometimes. And I did. I really messed up sometimes. I hurt people's feelings, and I crossed boundaries, and I I was an arrogant punk of a guy, and not great in many ways. And I did really good work many times, and that's just the rough with the smooth. And not that I'm okay with having behaved badly, but I can have some compassion to myself when I look back. Oh, I feel so tender towards myself as a younger teacher, and I was trying so hard. And I
Mm.
would want to say to myself, well done, Adam. You know, it's okay. It's okay. It's okay to make
And
mistakes. It's okay to not really know what you're doing. And maybe I would say ease off a little bit. It's all right. You don't have to try quite so hard. No.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's a good advice. And did you feel alone when you teach all those years, or did you have a lot
Yeah.
of pairs, other teacher to speak, to exchange, to
No, I
confront?
mean, I think
That's a big
I think
question.
it's a lonely job anyway. It just is. It's a lonely job, and there's nothing much to be done about that. Even if you have colleagues in the room, assistants in the room, if everybody in the room is going through the process that you're leading, you're on your own in some way. I guess it's different if you're teaching with co-teaching with someone. That's different. I never managed to do that very well. I've done it sometimes reasonably well, but it's not my favorite way to work. I'm too much of a kind of wild painter. I like to just go where I never plan what I do. And I mean, that's the other thing. People plan so much these days. Gabrielle didn't plan. And those encounter groups I went to in the 1980s were completely unplanned. And so I learned from that, those encounter groups, before I even started the rhythms, I learned that letting a room do what it is doing is magic, or opens the door to magic happening. And
Mm.
I had a very deep faith in that. And so I never planned my workshops. I never planned a playlist. I mean, in those early days, Susanna and Yakov were teaching with cassette tapes in those long workshops. They had a double cassette deck, and they would be
I know.
rewinding one tape while they were playing the other one. And that's how I started too.
Mm.
I went off, and the first thing I ever did was teach a weekend workshop in Africa. That's another whole story. At the school that I went to when I was 4 or 5 years old, my very first school, by random synchronicity, I got invited to do a weekend workshop with the teachers there. And so I had 5 teachers, and I did a weekend workshop with a bunch of 40 cassette tapes. We're so spoiled with music now. I want to say to all you young teachers, like, back off with the music like fixation, and learn how to teach without music a bit. Learn how to work with group process where it's not so stimulated, and learn to tolerate the difficulty that people have with that lack of stimulation, because it's like gold dust, especially these days where we're so overstimulated. We're all so overstimulated, and then it's like you could say the last thing that people need is to go into a room and be more stimulated. Like, yeah, it's okay. The good music is fine, and the stimulation in a five rhythms room is fine, or a movement space is fine. And that ability to work without music and to let the temperature come down and get more dry and more difficult, less inspired, just physical, working with physical movement. And it doesn't have to be all deep and meaningful. Just to is so valuable. And I kind of like I've gone off on a side shoot. What was I talking about before I went off on that side shoot? I can't. What was the question you asked? I've gone off track a
Yeah,
bit.
yeah. We will come back. First, the question was difficulties you met in your work,
Yeah,
and after what was the
yeah.
resources somewhere, and if you were alone in this
Thank
work,
you. That.
loneliness.
So
But
yes, I think.
behind that, it's Adam. It's also what are the resources for a teacher because it's a
Mhm,
long job. So you
mhm,
spoke at one point the movement meditation, daily movement meditation, somewhere practice what you are teaching.
yeah,
But what I know it's you find resources in other places than
yeah,
dance.
yeah.
Like
So
meditation is a big world.
yeah,
Mm.
I was lucky enough to have Gabrielle as a resource, and in those early days, there were so few teachers. We all had her phone number, and I would call her. And I remember particularly a time on the subject of aloneness. I remember I was teaching a workshop in Freiburg in Germany, and I was so moved by what was happening. It was like achingly beautiful, and I felt so alone on the Saturday night. And I just called Gabrielle and I said, and I just talked to her for a bit. And I think it's really valuable to have people that you can talk to who are in the business. And it might be a colleague, it might be a mentor, a teacher of yours. It's super valuable to be able to just talk to someone who understands that loneliness, because it is a lonely path to be a teacher. Nobody understands what you're doing. Not really. Least of all you. A lot of the time, we're stumbling in the dark. What we're really doing is subtle and deep. It's not about putting on music. That's the least of it. It's not about what you say. It's about your presence. It's about who you are, not what you do. And who you are is subtle and profound and difficult to really know. I mean, we don't really know. We never really, there's always more. There's way, like an iceberg, there's way more below the surface than above. And most of what's happening is a total mystery to us, I would say. And so, and there's a loneliness about that because everyone else in the room thinks that you know what you're doing as the leader. And everyone else in the room thinks that you're in the center of attention because they're all giving you, but you're not. That's not me that you're giving your attention to, at least on a good day. This is me getting out of the way. This is
Mm.
There's something more subtle happening here. It's not about me. And none of us really quite understand that. And the loneliness of that is a terrible thing. It's painful. Like literally painful. I've wept. I mean, you can probably see it in my eyes. I could weep now with the pain of it. But it's such a sweet pain. And I think it's the pain, it's a very profound spiritual pain of the loneliness of a human life. We're all lonely. It's a lonely business being in a body and experiencing this level at which I'm not you. To experience that. And here I am, and I see you, and I feel you, and I'm touched by you somehow, but you're not me. and you don't really know me all the way down. I don't even know me all the way down. We don't know each other. So there's this sort of deep, deep distinction or separation that is part of the truth. Right? And there's also this truth that we are exquisitely together. And somehow the paradox of that, those two things being true at the same time, you get to hold that paradox in a very profound way as a teacher, I think. You get to live it and embody it without being able to talk about it, without anyone else knowing that that's what you're doing. That's lonely
Mm.
and beautiful and an incredible honor and a very profound spiritual practice. Now, I think teaching, when you do it well, when you're not just putting on fucking good music, it's a very profound spiritual practice. And any spiritual practice will throw you on the ropes, like a boxing term, it knocks back on the ropes. Any profound spiritual practice will take you to your edge where it fucking hurts.
Mm.
It
Mm.
hurts being a human, often, not always, of course. And, there are amazing, beautiful, ecstatic moments as a teacher I've had, just off the charts. I've had my strongest spiritual experiences teaching movement, which is not really about teaching movement at all. It's
Yeah,
it's being there and channeling something.
beautiful.
God knows
Yeah.
what it is.
Thank you to remind those deep and profound. And my God, show your cup. Your cup. I saw your cup before. You have your cup. Yes, you have to show your cup. That's the truth. Yes. I know it's an important word for you. Adam, I see the time is gone. And if you have to give a workshop now, a dance workshop, how do you imagine it? Can I ask you that now?
Now,
You feel good. It's just like just to imagine if you have to give a workshop 2 days, 3 days, how do you imagine it to be in this truth, to be right in what you can offer? What is it?
well, it's going to be a bit of
If
a
it's not
guess because it's
an
18
estimate,
months
and
since I taught anything.
I know that's why I
Um,
ask you.
yeah.
Mm,
Um, but it would have a lot to do with stillness and
mm,
silence and emptiness because to me that's like the movement and the dance and the feelings and the relating and the experience that we're all having of stuff happening is that's obvious. I mean, even that, there's lots of it that's mysterious to us, but it's obvious. It's visible, tangible, especially in a movement workshop. It's one of the wonderful things about it is a lot of stuff that was invisible becomes visible. The feelings become visible. The characters become visible in the movement, in the embodiment. But I had this sense like as I was dancing for so many years, and I realized that over the years, what's really happening inside me and in the rooms that I'm working with or part of, what's really happening is there's something growing inside me that is completely still and silent. It's not going anywhere. It's just a presence. And that is the gold dust. Like that's what it's all really about. It's about Zen, no thing, emptiness, silence, breath, or even closer than breath. Yeah, even closer than breath.
gold dust. It can be a good title.
Yeah. So I think if I was going to teach a workshop, but that would just be more explicit than it even used to be when I was before I got ill.
Mm.
I was aware that that was kind of where we're going. Gabrielle would say, your job is to get people moving and then bring them together. And where you're going is emptiness. That's where you're going. That's the point, is to disappear, really.
That's a beautiful end, no? Isn't it? Do you want to add something or I wanted to say in this meeting?
Mm. Well,
Because we didn't do absolutely not what I wrote because I worked before Adam Barley and I have like 2 pages of questions and we didn't do anything like that. But thank you so much. I think we me and I hope people will love to hear some of what you said and what you experimented.
well,
What you want
we
to
maybe
add?
we can revisit this space, and I'm curious what your other questions are. But if I had to say something now to people who are teaching, those of you who are teaching and maybe haven't been doing it so long, you're just starting, I would say a kind of, I wish for you a mixture of like standing tall, and so people can see you, like stand tall and hold your head up and be willing to be seen, and kind of let life feel you and let life come to you, but also at the same time bow
Hmm.
your head, because you don't know shit. None of us do. you know Very humbling. It's a humbling process to become as brilliant and strong and beautiful as you really are. It's a very humbling process, and rightly so. We are brilliant, and that's that's a humbling thing to really take on, because it's a gift. That brilliance that we are is a gift, not an entitlement.
Hmm. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Thanks for listening, everybody.
Hmm.